So thanks very much, TJ, for connecting with us. No secret to everyone, because we let you know that our Vermont Attorney General was going to be our guest and chat with us informally today. And I'm sure you all are all well aware of the name TJ Donovan, and what he does for the state of Vermont. But I picked up a couple of things you might not know, or maybe you do, and I was the only one that I guess I knew this stuff, but it was hiding in the back of my brain cell recesses someplace. And that's that. You let's see, your family, for starters. Now, a lot of people are aware that your mom has been serving in the Vermont legislature in this House of Representatives since 2001. So that's a common factoid out there. I hadn't made the connection that your grandfather was, let's see, a U.S. District Court judge. And I guess I knew the name and I knew the position and everything, but just didn't make the connection. And that your uncle was in the Vermont Senate. So quite a family connection there through law and politics. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, as I like to say, we've hit our ceiling of middle management.
So TJ has graciously taken a few minutes of his day to be with us today. He's been Attorney General for us in Vermont since 2000, well, elected in 2016, but took office beginning in 2017, like everybody else does. And has been a real friend of Vermont credit unions on the issues that we've had to have an interface back and forth with the AG's office. So that's been great. And we appreciate you taking time to be with us this afternoon. And each week, as I think I shared in an email exchange with you, we've had different perspectives of different aspects of whether it's state government or other industry sectors or other finance folks and whatnot, kind of sharing their perspective on what things have been like in their part of the world during all of this pandemic and what things are going to look like going forward and whatnot. So I thought it might be a great idea, and people might like to hear from you on what the AG's office has been looking at, what's of concern to you, how we can be of assistance or you of assistance to us, either way. So we'll just let you roll with it for a while, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. And just so how much time do we have?
Well, so I don't want to limit you, and I don't want to say as much time as you want because somebody's going to send me a nasty note. So whatever works for you. But usually we slot an hour for these, but most speakers don't go anywhere near that long.
Okay.
We just need to make sure we have time for a couple questions.
We have we have a playoff Little League baseball game tonight.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Yeah, that's the priority. Well, thanks, Joe, again for having me, and thank you to everybody for the work you all are doing for Vermonters during this crisis and in normal times as well. I hope to return to those normal times sooner rather than later, although I don't think any of us can say when that day will arrive. Let me just talk a little bit about kind of our response to the COVID crisis and what we are looking at in the future. Certainly, we've worked very closely with the governor's office and his administration in regards to the governor's executive orders. And, our role traditionally has been enforcement. And when this started out in March and the governor issued his first executive order, I did a couple of things with my team. Number one was, and I've always believed this, that the best way to enforce the law is to give people the opportunity to comply with it. And I was very reluctant, and I know the governor was as well, because we discussed it, was to be in any way heavy-handed in regards to the enforcement of the executive orders. We wanted to work with people. We wanted to raise awareness. We wanted to educate folks in a way to bring about voluntary compliance with the governor's executive order. And by and large, we've done that very well in this state. And so to that end, I created a rapid response team in my office to talk with people and to handle Vermonters' questions as they arose. So none of this, press one to hopefully get somebody, but to have a team to respond to every call. And we got hundreds of calls. Really in obviously March and April and May, it slowed down significantly. But early on, and it was a lot of businesses and a lot of people trying to do two things. Number one, comply with the governor's executive order, but at the same time, keep their business afloat, keep the lights on, and be able to keep food on their families' tables. And so we worked, I think, very well with a large amount of Vermont businesses and individuals to try to thread that needle to bring about compliance with the governor's executive order, but at the same time, try to be creative and innovative in order to keep their business open during this time in the areas that we could. I'm proud of this fact that we only had to go to court twice so far in the entirety of this time to enforce the governor's executive order. The first one was an individual was engaged in price gouging. He was really jacking up the price of PPE, protective equipment, selling it to hospitals. This was during the month of March, really at the peak. He was making representations that they were N95 masks, when in fact they were just kind of the generic surgical masks. I think he was selling them for $2.50 a piece. And in the month of February, right before COVID really kind of peaked in the US, they were like 6 cents a piece. And so he was selling them at $2.50 a piece, selling thousands and thousands to hospitals. And I don't blame the hospitals. They were desperate. If you remember this in March, there was a mad dash to get as much PPE as we could. And so we went to court and we were able to get an injunction enjoining him from continuing to sell that type of equipment in Vermont at those prices. The second case was a gym owner who just wouldn't shut down, kept opening his doors, made the news. And I mean, we would work with folks. I mean, I was on the phone with them personally, trying to see if we could come to some sort of compromise. And because he'd make the argument. He said, "Hey, listen," he said, "this is how I provide for my family." And I'd talk about the shared sacrifice that all these other business owners were going through. And he'd come back and to me say, "Well, why is a liquor store open then? And how can a gym not be open?" And it got to the point where we just came to an impasse, and I'd started getting calls from other gym owners who were saying, "Hey, listen, I'm at a competitive disadvantage because he's now taking my clients." And so we went to court against that gym owner. This was in Rutland. We were able to get an injunction there as well, enjoining him from continuing to open his doors. And that case is now still being litigated because he has countersued both me and the governor, claiming that the executive order is unconstitutional. And that case is continuing to go through the court system. I'm very confident that the governor's executive orders are both lawful and constitutional. So we'll continue to litigate that case. But I think the fact that we only had to go to court twice is a testament, number one, to Vermonters. I think by and large, we all know this. People want to do the right thing. People are cognizant that we're part of a community, that we all have a role to play. And I think by and large, obviously, people did the right thing, and that's why our numbers are so low and we're doing so well compared to the rest of the country. And I think the second part is we worked very collaboratively, not only with Vermonters by creating this rapid response team, but with different agencies and state government, particularly Commerce. We were on the phone with them, I think, daily, perhaps not daily, but a few times a week. Because the governor would give the executive order, Commerce would interpret it, we'd have to enforce it. And so I think it was a great example of working together, different branches of government, different state agencies, different political parties, and doing what's right for Vermont during those months of April, March, April, and May. Things have slowed down, in terms of those calls coming in from constituents. I do expect them to increase as we go back to school. I do expect to have some questions regarding the mask mandate, particularly in schools, as that order goes into effect, I believe, on August 1st. And, you know, again, my goal is going to be to balance our public health, our public safety, and frankly, our common sense, and to work with people as best I can. I have no desire to start suing or prosecuting otherwise law-abiding, good, hard-working Vermonters. So I keep going back to those lessons that we've always learned. If there's a problem, solve it, and solve it by talking with people. And I think we can satisfy our twin objectives of our public health, maintaining and increasing our public health, which we have done, and at the same time, opening up our economy. And in regards to the economy, you know, our role certainly is consumer protection. The one thing I'd like to put out to you guys that I'd love to talk, and I think you're doing a pretty good job of it already, and it's probably on your plate already. I'm saying this to every business group I talk with, is privacy. I think how we define privacy in this new normal going forward is going to be critical as we continue to work and educate and get our healthcare. All these services are going to be delivered digitally, online. What does that mean for people's privacy? Where does all this data go? Who retains it? Are people selling it or not? Do consumers have that? Do consumers have a property interest in their data? These questions are coming to a head. You know, we were the first state, really at my office, is urging to create a data broker law, which regulates third-party data brokers. I think consumers have a right to know where their information is being bought and sold. I file very few lawsuits in this role because I think oftentimes you can get things done a lot sooner, a lot quicker, and a lot more efficiently by talking to the other side. So when I do sue, it's meaningful to me. And we did file a lawsuit just in the beginning of March against a company that was essentially screen scraping billions of photos off the internet. Violations of terms of service of all these different platforms. But they were then applying biometric software, facial recognition software to these photos of kids, of us, but also of kids, and selling it. No notice to the consumer, no consent. We sued, saying it was under the Vermont Consumer Protection Statute an unfair act. That's still in litigation. But as we go forward here, I think we got to carve out what people's privacy interests and privacy rights are. The other thing I would point out and would really ask your help is in the area of scams. The grandparent scam is up. We've had 30, I think we've had 96 to date, year to date, 34 or 35, which have been since June 1. I'll just give a quick story on that. I got called by a neighbor 10 o'clock, this is probably 2 or 3 weeks ago at night, and his 88-year-old father had just been scammed and sent, I think, 14 grand of his Social Security money to this scammer. And it was that his son was in the hospital, had been in a bad accident, and he needed money. And he wired him 14 grand. And so we got that call at 10 o'clock at night. And I was able to reach out to Chris Delia at the Bankers Association, Joe, talked to Phil Daniels because he had wired the money, I think, from his bank. And we were able to catch it in time to freeze the account, to stop the transfer and get his money back. that's a success story, but that's a success story just because of relationships. And it's a great success story, but we also have to acknowledge that's not going to work for everybody, because everybody doesn't have a neighbor who's an AG who can get on the phone to Joe in the morning or to Chris at 7:30 in the morning and put a stop to this. And so we really need to continue to work together to raise awareness for folks out there where this is happening. Again, 34 since June 1. That is an uptick for us on this. Somewhat COVID related, because in addition to I'm in jail, I'm in the hospital. It's I'm in the hospital because I'm sick and I need the money. And look, these things are up because they work. And so whatever you can do, I'd appreciate that, and and would love to partner with you guys as we kind of go forward into this new normal with these scams on the rise. Why don't I stop there and see if there's any questions, Joe?
That would be great. Thank you very much. Comments, questions from anybody?
TJ, this is John Dwyer at New England Federal. And
hey, how are you?
I'm sure you know this, but even with all of the education that we've done over the years to consumers, the story you just told is a needle in a haystack, because it's not common where we're able to get the money back. In fact, we are seeing an increase in our member victim, what we call member victim fraud, where the member is the victim and sends money. And we've had one of those where we were able to get about, I think it was 30,000 back for somebody, but it's really uncommon. You have to catch the bank on the other end willing to help you. But I think the more we can all make public as best we can and educate, the scams are just coming at us at a very high velocity. And that's not new news to you, I know. I'm just confirming that we help when we can. We do everything we can to try to get the money back for people. But it's once in a while we get lucky, but it's not that often, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, we're trying to raise awareness. We did a press release last week, and actually I got Channel 3 outside my door here on our sidewalk, because I'm going to do an interview with them here after I'm done with you guys about the number of scams, and in particular the grandparent scam, to raise awareness. And it's amazing to me how this stuff works, but you're pulling on people's heartstrings. And then you've got issues of shame and embarrassment tied up into it when it happens to you, so people don't want to talk about it. So raising awareness is critical. And I don't have an answer today, but would love to continue to talk with you guys to figure out how we can do this, because as I said, not everybody's gonna have a neighbor who's the AG who can get on the phone. So I'm totally aware of the shortcoming.
Hi, TJ. It's Christine from AVCU. Working also with Lisa in your office, and
Great. She's the best.
we have a coffee break series that we're going to be doing with her about scams and how we can both work together.
Great. Well, that's great to hear. Thank you for that. Yeah, Lisa runs our CAP office, which is our Consumer Assistance Program, which helps Vermont consumers resolve disputes with businesses and protect themselves from fraud and access any available service. That's going to be interesting because we operate a consumer hotline with students. And they get credits, and we run a class up at UVM. We mediate consumer disputes, I think, as some of you know, and we track the fraud and scam complaints. And so I'm worried, given what's going to happen in the fall, if we're going to have the students to do that, because that's really our constituent services arm. So we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that, as I think we're all in that situation, in terms of going back to work. We've been remote since maybe kind of a week before, I think early March. We left a little bit early. And I don't think we're going back anytime soon. I do think that, you know, I'm a believer that even in this crisis, there's opportunity here. We just got to be willing to think ahead and to seize it. I think it's very true for state government that we now need to really embed these qualities of flexibility and nimbleness and creativity. Frankly, everything you guys have to do in your sector to stay competitive, government should be doing that too. And really that question of what's next is something that I'm very interested in. You know, I am worried, and you certainly know better than me this, I'm worried about our economy in the fall. I'm worried about the unemployment benefits running out. I'm worried about, as you all know, as we all kind of did, rightfully so in the crisis, we deferred a lot of these payments. But that bill's going to come due. You guys know that better than me. And so, you know, I guess my question to you guys is, how are we going to address this when the bill comes due, whether it was mortgage payments, credit card payments, and September 1 or October 1, these bills come due and we're still not coming. You know, who knows what the federal government's going to do in terms of the unemployment and whether or not we're going to have another CARES package. So I'm concerned about the economic outlook for the fall, but tell me I'm wrong. Anybody want to tell me I shouldn't be concerned?
We'll let John Dwyer tell you should be concerned.
Go ahead, Rod.
No, this is Rob Miller. I think you're concerned about exactly the right things. And if you need a list of further things to be concerned about, feel free to give me a call anytime. Because, you know, I think the answer to the question is that we've never been here before, right? I mean, nothing in our history is going to prepare us, you know, for what we're about to face. And we've never had the amount and volume of deferments on our balance sheets that we have right now. So, you know, we're going to have to figure it out. You know, I think that I can't speak for everyone on the phone, but I feel relatively confident that everyone from the credit union industry and many, you know, and I think probably for most part from the community banks are all, you know, taking the attitude that the more that we can do to take care of our customers, our members, you know, the better off we're going to be financially as well. But it's going to be a rough road, especially as we come to the end of the year and into next year. I wish I could make you feel better.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the answer. And I appreciate the willingness, again, that we're all in this together. And I think that is becoming more clear to people, the interconnectedness of the economy and how we truly all are in this together and the willingness to work together. So I want to thank you guys for your leadership, for being out front to helping community members. I think it's critical. I want to thank you. I know you received a letter from me. We put out a rule. And Joe, I want to thank you because I did hear from some folks complaining. I didn't hear any complaints from you guys, and I want to thank you for that. We put out a rule, I guess an interpretation of a rule, if you will, that the CARES money was not subject to debt collection. And first of all, thank you for, Robert, what you just said, and certainly that value of protecting your customer and that value that really we are all interconnected in the community. And thank you for following that rule that I knew you would. It was, you know, I got a couple responses back from some folks in the financial services. And as Robert said, we've never faced this before. Maybe the Great Depression. I thought there was a wonderful article, I think it was in the Times maybe a week or so ago, saying somewhat of an optimistic view that this is, as I was just talking to Christine, that this is an opportunity that you look historically about everything that happened coming out of the Great Depression. When Roosevelt took over for Hoover, they had very different philosophies. Hoover did not believe in government intervention, did not believe in an infusion of government spending into infrastructure. Obviously, Roosevelt did. You know, whether you call it a new deal or not, but this idea of a community, the idea that government spends, that invests in the community into infrastructure, expand infrastructure from roads and bridges to broadband to schools to healthcare. I think there's an opportunity for us, Robert, as you just said, to really understand if we take care of each other, if we invest and understand that some people are going to need a little bit more time to get back on their feet, we can come out of this pretty strong. I think there's a great opportunity actually for Vermont here, but we got to be bold and we got to be looking down the line here. You guys know this better than I. The real estate market's booming. It's booming. And it's not all Vermonters, which is a great thing. And so I don't think austerity works. I think that's been clear. And I think when you look historically, government spending into infrastructure to better the community for economic development and to put money back in the economy is a good thing, in my opinion. And I want to thank you guys for the role you play in supporting our community. Somebody better take that soapbox away from me.
I would think, TJ, that, after all of the forbearance provisions are behind us and the additional unemployment dollars and, all of the different financial resources and whatnot are in the past, in the rearview mirror, that your office, I would imagine, end of the year, into next year, whenever it happens to be, is going to start getting maybe an uptick, like you referenced earlier, in phone calls from consumers who have or are having difficulty, not with their local financial institution, but with that lender or whoever they have the relationship with that's, God knows where on the other side of the country or whatnot, some mortgage broker or whatever other financial institution. And those are the ones that are going to be probably, the hard stories to be listening to. I would imagine that, maybe those organizations, maybe some of them will not be abiding by guidance and laws. Maybe some of them will be, who knows, but it's going to be much more difficult situations for your folks than trying to follow up with a local financial institution.
Absolutely. And I think, I think you're seeing the value of relationships.
Right.
And, as whoever said it, who was the author? Thomas Friedman, the world is flat. We understand that, but local matters, again, going back to that, really, which isn't a great example, to be honest with you, of stopping that grandparent scam. It worked because we were local. It worked because of relationships. It worked a little bit because of, frankly, privilege of somebody knowing me, me knowing other folks, which is part of my job. But that's the challenge as we go forward. How do we level that playing field for everybody so everybody has that same access into government, and probably has those relationships with you, but taking really those ethos of community banking and credit union across the financial service industry when we get into some rough sledding here, I think, in the fall and winter. And I really hope I'm wrong about the economy. I'm not a pessimist by nature, but I think the fall is going to be tough with the economic climate and the political climate. I think September, October, November are going to be very difficult for this country. We're getting prepared for, I think, which we're already seeing, unfortunately, an uptick, probably in some bias incidents and hate crimes. We're seeing it already. Those are difficult cases, legally speaking, for a number of reasons. But I think the fall is going to be difficult for us. And what I'm telling my folks right now is take your time off in the summer because come September 1, we are going to be back at it 24/7.
Right. Hey, questions or comments?
That's my optimistic view.
Questions or comments, folks? Anybody else want to jump in?
I have a question, if I
Hey,
may.
Rick.
This
Please.
is Richard Brock, General. I'm privileged to be with a law firm that advises the association from time to time. I'd be interested in your thoughts on whether or not a business, a credit union or a law firm, that complies with the governor's guidelines is subject to liability if people catch COVID-19 or employees do, or if you've had a chance to think about that. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
And so if you can help me out, that would be great.
You know, I don't, but I can tell you, I think every business is having that conversation. You can do, and you know, I don't think you can. I don't think you can force employees back right now. And even with that compliance, I don't know the answer. You know, for us, I can tell you, you know, we looked at a whole set of different scenarios about how could this work in terms of the office layout, staggered times, and we couldn't get it to work. And it was just, it's frankly easier and frankly more efficient, and the employees like it more. Not all, but the majority prefer remote working. So we're going to stay that way, I think, for the foreseeable future. But as to the liability question, I can't offer an opinion today. I don't know if anybody can, but
I can't either, so.
I can guarantee you we will see those cases.
Yeah.
We will also see an uptick, I think, in employment discrimination cases for people either actual or perceived sickness.
Sure.
And being let go or being removed. I would expect to see that in the fall as well. Again, add the complication of the flu season on top of COVID in the workplace. This is going to be we're going to be busy in the fall.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't think anybody. If you can find anybody who answers that question, let me know.
No, it's just nice not to feel like the Lone Ranger. That's all.
I hear you. I don't think anybody's answered it. As we lawyers say, let the courts answer it.
Right.
Well, as long as it's not our business that gets tested.
Right.
Yeah. I do. A couple of my peers in other states have shared in meetings that we have once a week that their state legislatures have enacted. I think it's in 2 situations, maybe. I forget which 2 states. Some liability protections waiver, whatever you want to call it, in their legislature. I don't know the particulars and whatnot. A lot of different scenarios than Vermont, where it was, a much bigger issue, greater population and business concentration and whatnot. So probably a higher priority than, it would be here. But, that is a real good, a real key question, Rick, and I'm sure it's going to get tested here and everywhere else sooner rather than later, unfortunately. Anything else, folks, before we throw our state's attorney general out to the media in front of his house?
I thought he was going to a ball game.
I'm going to the ball game after that.
Okay, good.
Joe, I just have one quick thing. TJ, I'm Joe's communications director, John Cody. And we have, as our association, a direct line to all of the CEOs and a lot of the senior executives that are on this call right now. Is there someone in your office who I could liaise with to get those fraud alerts? I actually have Christine passed along to me the grandparents one that's going to go in our newsletter on Friday. But we would also do, as soon as we get information about it, do a fraud alert. So is there someplace on your...
Yes, and thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. If you could email me at thomas.donovan@vermont.gov, I'll put you in touch with the right person. And the other thing is, I don't think it's the best way to handle this, but even having that rapid response where, again, we have the relationship, we know who to call in an effort to catch, these transfers happening. Maybe we'll get lucky again like we did last time, but again, just relationships and the ability to call each other, I think would be great. So thomas.donovan@vermont.gov.
I'm sure Joe has your email address. I've written it down, but I'll definitely get you an email right away. Thank you.
Thank you. I like your background.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you very much, TJ. We greatly appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to spend a few minutes with us this afternoon.
All right. Joe, thank you. And thanks to y'all for what you're doing.
Good luck with the media, but you probably don't need it because you deal with them all the time. And more importantly, have a great time at the Little League game.
Thank you.
All
Talk
right.
to you later, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Just
TJ.
a couple quick items for everybody. This Saturday is the first, right? That's when the mandatory mask in public issue goes out. I assume that most Vermont credit unions, from a business perspective, are appreciated seeing that come out, because the commentary that I was getting, at least from some of you early on, was that you wanted to enforce masks for people going into your lobby when that first started up, but it was a little difficult without a broader guidance on it requiring the public to wear masks elsewhere too. So anybody foresee that as an issue for you at all? No?
No, it'll be helpful.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's, as we talked a couple of months ago, it would have been helpful in May when we were
Right.
opening, but
Right.
it's, we actually haven't received a lot of pushback from members. That's still been, very few. So we don't expect it to change much at this point.
I read TJ referenced students coming back to town in, what is it, a couple weeks or whatnot. I know a couple smaller colleges in Vermont have just decided to go all completely online. I think, like in my neck of the woods, UVM, St. Michael's, and Champlain are still mostly in person, I think, or at least through Thanksgiving. And I was reading some article or editorial, I forget what it was, late last week, or maybe it was over the weekend, that was pretty concerning about, how when you have 65 students coming back, college students coming back to Vermont, roughly, you can have them sign all of the, I promise to not do this, that, and the other thing that you want, and wear masks in class and all that kind of business. And they may follow all of that, but a big part of college life is the social activities, and they ain't wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart, during those social times, for the most part anyway. So it'll be really interesting to see, at least from my perspective anyway, what happens to the rate of infection if it starts to ratchet up when school starts coming up pretty soon here. And hopefully it doesn't make so big of a problem that the administration feels that we need to take some steps back like they've done in some other states. The next 20, I don't know about you, if you wake up to the news like on VPR or something like that, like I do, then you would have heard, echoing what we sent in updates last week, that the Senate has been working, or at least the Republicans in the U.S. Senate have been working on their version of CARES 2, or whatever the right name is going to be. And this morning, they were saying that was coming out from the Republicans anyway into the Senate for whatever debate they're going to have momentarily. I think that happened today. And in a Washington update call that I was on a little bit before this one, they were pointing out how the next 24 hours is going to be, from their perspective anyway, for DC activities, is going to be really very active in terms of all of that going on. Because we all know there's a big tug of war going on between the Democrats and the Republicans, and then the House and the Senate. So we'll see what happens with all of that, but expect some detailed updates coming out from us over the next few days, or maybe the rest of this week, regarding all of that. The last thing I was going to ask you is something that none of you asked for in one of these meetings, but one of my counterparts in another state said was received in their version of these kinds of calls very, very well by his credit unions. And I just didn't know if it interested any of you. He had I don't know if it's the right terminology, but a clinical psychologist or somebody along those kinds of lines, talking to their credit unions about what their employees are going through and dealing, particularly ones working in the lobby or interfacing with people and so on and so forth, what kinds of mental gymnastics or stress or whatever are going on in those people's minds, and also those who have children. They're trying to do their job, but they also have children at home, and juggling between the two and schedules, and not knowing what schools are really going to be like in the fall yet in some cases, but still want to do their job, and so on and so forth. And you know, it sounded intriguing, but I didn't know if from a sample of credit union perspective, if that would be, you know, worthwhile to have insights on for you folks, or whether you've already gone there with, you know, whatever other folks you use for that kind of information. Or does it not matter? He was pointing out, or she was pointing out in a video clip that I saw of her, how, you know, among your employees and the general public, there are two camps, right? There are those people who, well, there's probably a lot in between too. There are those people who are very, very concerned about uncertainty and mask wearing and on and on and on. And then those who are at, I don't know if I'd say the opposite end of the spectrum, but not as concerned. And there's a mental friction between the two, even if it's not spoken in the office or out in public or whatnot. Where, you know, one thinks the other is blowing things out of proportion or not treating it seriously enough, you know, whichever. And so she talks about those kind, or this person I heard anyway, talks about those kinds of things with regard to credit union employees.
This is Jean. I certainly think there's going to be a lot of stress on our employees as school starts, and they're responsible for 3 days a week of childcare and studying, helping students study. So I think it's going to be a particularly stressful time for our staff.
Okay.
And I'm concerned about that side.
Thanks for those comments.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would agree with that. This is Rob.
Go ahead.
No, that's all I had to say, John. I agree.
So, you know, I think, Joe, none of us are going to say it doesn't matter, because all of us, I suspect they're dealing with so many new situations on a weekly, at least a weekly basis, where we are much more involved in our employees' personal lives than we used to be.
Sure.
You know, their fears, their concerns, their confidence, whatever extreme you want to go to. And we are all probably trying to figure out, you know, what does school mean? What does the new school mean? Because what we may have done in March isn't what we're willing to do now,
Right.
as far as support for staff. So, you know, I think the kind of people that you've brought to these meetings that can make us think, make us consider things, that can be helpful.
Well, thank you folks for those reactions to that, and I'll see what I can come up with in that vein that I think might be helpful, or at least interesting, if nothing else, and maybe shed some kind of light from a trained person's perspective. Okay, any questions from anyone or comments on anything?